And behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb.
Do you want your life to make an impact? Most people do. I mean, honestly, that's the thing you live with from childhood forward. It's like, how can I make an impact on this world? Because everybody has that desire. I mean, it's hardwired in you. You've had that desire since you were a child. You want your life to make an impact. Do you know that involves a lifestyle a little different than ready, fire, aim? I mean, ready, fire, aim is a ridiculous proposition to entertain, whether it was target practice or your life. No wonder God carefully aimed at the world. Knowing the mission of God the Father, Jesus came with such strategic and careful aim. I mean, he was focused on what would matter most. He made the bullseye of the target, you and me. He said, I came to seek and save that which is lost. And his spiritual vision beyond his own mission to love God and love others was to train a group of people. His vision was spiritual multiplication. So he pulled some people from ordinary common life and he pulled them up to try to help them focus on what mattered most, because his strategic plan was more kingdom laborers in every facet and sphere of society, worldwide. No wonder at the end of life, Jesus said, man, when you and I see each other again, I want to be able to say, well done, good and faithful laborer or servant or worker. You got things done. But how was he going to do what he was going to do to seek and save that which is lost? And how are these guys going to be on this aggressive, hands-on training program experience with him and learn from him? Because there was going to be a limited time span in which they were going to learn how to lead a high-impact life. Well, he modeled what he was teaching. He didn't just pass them books. He modeled for them. He was the YouTube. I mean, he was the model. As they followed, they could begin to figure out. I gave my nephew a toy one Christmas, and when he opened the box, it was full of a bunch of pieces. It didn't come pre-assembled. It was just hundreds of pieces. I pulled out the instruction sheet and started unfolding what looked rather non-intimidating at first. But by the time I got it unfolded, it was huge. And I'm looking at these hundreds, if not thousands of words going, this feels complicated. This feels laborious. Like, how am I going to do this? And I heard two little hands from the other side of the sheet beginning to put parts together. And I quickly read, and he was doing it correctly. So much so I turned to my sister, because he was on step 21, and it was all correct. I said, you may have a genius. At this point, I heard people chuckling in the room, and I was mesmerized by his skill at how fast he was learning to put this together. When somebody said, hey, Dwight, look at the other side of all the words, the instruction sheet. And on the other side, when I flipped it around, was what he was looking at, a picture, a model of where the parts went and how it all went together. No wonder. John 1, verse 14 in John chapter 1, this is John telling you that the Word, the Christ, the Messiah, the one who was carefully, strategically aiming, he became flesh, and it says he lived among us. And we saw his glory, the glory of the one and only begotten Son of the Father, unique, one of a kind, full of grace and truth. These guys began to watch Jesus as they followed him. A bunch of ordinary, maybe less than ordinary guys. To be honest, they self-described themselves. The first day Jesus met Peter, the first words out of his mouth after Jesus had connected with Peter at his workplace, and Jesus starts turning his work around, and he's a fisherman and he catches a bunch of fish, and then he feels a little overwhelmed that somebody so awesome is with him, up close with him. And so Peter just blurts, I'm a sinner. And Jesus doesn't tell him, well, go get your act together and then maybe we'll have a second conversation. Jesus just immediately says, come follow me. I'll teach you how to lead a high impact life. And Peter begins to follow Jesus. In fact, everybody that Jesus collected, he met them outside synagogue walls. He met them in here, there, and everywhere, and he began to ask them what he asks you today. I mean, the invitation was simple. Come follow me. In other words, come watch. Come learn how you can lead a high impact life. And then Jesus began to be what John 1:14 tells us. The Word became flesh and lived among us. And we, the writer says, John says, watched him. And as they watched him, they began to see in him the way, the ministry model to follow. What's the first thing they noticed about him? Well, it was an up-close strategy. I mean, his ministry model involved being up close. Here you and I are, we're seated, close enough that I'm really almost like at arm's length from you. And that was what Jesus said one day when they said, where's this kingdom you keep talking about? He said, the kingdom of God is at hand. It's arm's length, it's up close. The word that he used and that the scripture described of who he was Emmanuel. Emmanuel, what does Emmanuel mean? This word that was describing Jesus. Emmanuel means God with us. It doesn't mean God up front, it means God up close. Now God's with us. Emmanuel, God with us. Arm's length, up close, up close. That was what he modeled for them. He wasn't teaching them an upfront strategy. He didn't require them to pass tests that they were great singers or they were great speakers or great upfront talent. He wasn't building a kingdom that way. He believed what you and I have come to really recognize through our own lives. Who are the people who've impacted your life? See, you may impress up front from a distance on a big stage with spotlights. You may impress from a distance, but you impact up close. Jesus committed to model what kingdom laborership looks like for the eyes that were watching and learning from him. Said one day, the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve. Even give his life as a ransom for many. I mean, he was focused on his mission to seek and save that which is lost. And everywhere he went, in fact, Matthew 9 verse 35 tells us that Jesus made a circuit from town to town, village to village. He went throughout their cities and villages teaching in synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, healing every disease and every affliction. That meant he was focused one life at a time on person after person, but recognizing the limitation of his own physical body. He looked around and his heart was moved. In fact, Scripture would tell you that his heart broke because he saw people like sheep turning every direction, having no direction, no aim, no purpose, no meaning. And he had come that they might have life and might have it to the full, to the max. And so he turned to his disciples who were in a training program with him, learning kingdom laborership. And he realized even myself in the limited body that I have, and even these 12, we're not enough. He looked at this harvest field and went, man, it's everywhere. And he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful. Because everywhere he'd gone, there were needs and people who were hungry for somebody willing to be up close with them. He said, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. He turned to them and said, pray for harvest hands. Pray that there will be laborers cast into fields that are ripe for harvest everywhere. He'd been here, there, everywhere, but he faced the limitation of the Word in flesh, physical body that he had. He could only be one place at one time. At that point in time, he was limited with a physical body, but he wanted everybody who was watching and learning from him to see that within that limitation, high impact up close could happen. So he was moving about in the flesh, in the mainstreams, Most of the stories that you love and I love reading in the Gospels, when Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John share their accounts of what they saw him doing, those stories are not behind synagogue walls. They were out in the mainstreams. And even those that he collected to begin to teach how to become a laborer, because he said the harvest is ripe, but the laborers are few. He stepped onto the scene to say, you don't have to be a PhD scholar. You don't have to be a leading rabbi from a rabbinical training school. In fact, none of the guys he chose were graduates of leading rabbi training schools. They were all regular people that he met in the mainstreams of life where they did their work. Matthew, while he was collecting his taxes as a tax collector, he met Peter at his workplace, cleaning up after a day of work as a fisherman. And these people that he collected, not one of them graduates of rabbi training schools, and ordinary people, were already located through their vocations and their geographical locations in the mainstreams of life, where they had plenty of people to be up close with and be able to see them and be near them, and in the mainstreams of life bring the heart of God up close to others. You would have called them ordinary, but they were going to lead extraordinary lives of high impact, because there was one other thing that Jesus was teaching them through his ministry model up close in the mainstreams, that impact happens one life at a time. Can I reintroduce you to a very powerful, big number? One. You. You're one and you matter. And Jesus demonstrated over and over again the high value of one as he would reach out and up close touch one leper, as he would sit at a meal table with one person. And the impact was extraordinary, because it would begin to, I would call it domino ripple. Let me explain. It's compounding interest. It's exponential growth. It is what my grandmother taught me when seated at a table at her house, a large farm table, as a little kid who had more energy than I knew what to do with. Grandma had a plan. She'd reach up in her downstairs closet and she'd pull down a big tin full of dominoes, and she'd just dump them all over her dining room table. And then we'd begin to line up those dominoes. Ever done that? Line up dominoes, just simple. But we'd do it carefully. And as she had hundreds, she'd slip into the kitchen, start baking cookies, and I would keep my energy focused on, I wanted to use every domino. So her whole table got filled with all sorts of formations and little Ys in the road, and it was really cool and fun for me. But the greatest moment was when I called Grandma to walk back in the room, and her little house kind of moved when she walked. So I told her to walk carefully and slowly, because when she got there, I didn't want anything to happen prematurely. You know what's about to happen. And I couldn't wait. I'd reach my arm out, and she would grab my arm and pull it back and say, wait, grandson, before you touch that one domino, I just want you to consider what it would be like if you were so small. Now, this was before the Disney movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, so she was way ahead of her time. So she said, pretend you're so small that all you can see is one. That's all you see, just one domino. But never forget, grandson, if you impact that one just right, it's going to impact another. And that'll impact another, that will impact another. And before you know it, those dominoes, you don't have to worry about number 13 or 23 or 57 or 119. You just worry about the one that you're up close to, that's in front of you in the mainstreams of life where you live. That was the ministry model that Jesus was helping them see as he moved about. But what was his method? If that's his ministry model, what were Jesus' ministry methods? Well, again, just kind of three simple, doable by ordinary people like us. The first was, and if you were to just take your hands and put them in front of your eyes, this was something Jesus wanted to help people get over. He wanted them to see. You think that's not a big deal? That's a huge deal. Ask my son when he was in grade school. He'd been going to a school for a couple weeks, and I finally, there's a new school for him. Finally, at the dinner table, I said, son, how's it going at your new school? He said, Dad, I'm invisible. I said, son, what do you mean? He said, Dad, I'm invisible. Now, he's a kid, so I'm thinking, what's he talking about? I looked down the table at my wife, and she looked clueless, and I said, son, I don't understand. What do you mean invisible? He said, well, Dad, when we go out for recess in the morning, they all run straight past me. They don't see me, Dad. Like they know each other from last year. They went to school together last year, and I'm standing out there, and they're all running all around me, and nobody sees me, Dad. And then I get to the lunch, and I get my tray, and I sit down, Dad, and they're all looking for each other. They look straight past me, Dad. They don't even see me. And after school, Dad, when I'm waiting for Mom to pick me up, and it takes 13 minutes for her to get my sister before she gets to my school, Dad, I stand there 13 minutes, Dad, 13 minutes, and they all move everywhere, and nobody sees me, Dad. I'm invisible. At this point, he's just filled with emotion, and I am too as his father. I could only imagine what God the Father feels like, and my heart broke. No wonder it says in Matthew 9:35-38, his heart broke. Jesus' heart filled with compassion broke. Do you know how many people feel invisible every day? She's been your cashier at Walmart 5 times before. Do you see her? Or do you see your wallet or your purse, and you see everything else that you're dealing with and making sure all your stuff gets in the bags and you don't forget to take your bags? Do you see her? Do you see him, your service mechanic? I know that there's an African tribe that when one is walking down the road, they'll say, I see you. And the other walking toward them will say, I am here. What is that? It's the gift of sight and presence and relationship. It's connection. We were visiting a restaurant we hadn't been to before, and it took a while for our waiter to get to our table. By the time he got there, he was perspiring, and I said, hey, John, are you okay? And he said, what? I said, John, are you okay? He said, dude, how do you know my name? I said, well, what? He said, dude, like you're freaking me out. How do you know my name? I almost didn't want to tell him because he thought like, this is really, wow, how does this guy know my name? And I just looked at him and said, because, dude, you're wearing it right there. And he looked down at his shirt and went, oh. He thought some kind of mystical thing had happened that I'd called him by name. Nothing mystical. He was wearing it. John, you're wearing it. Why did he forget he was wearing it? Because nobody'd called him by name all night. They'd called their order over their shoulder. And I want this. And, oh yeah, add fries. And, for them, he's just the waiter. No, he's John. He not only had a name, but he had a story to tell. And by the end of the night, he'd slow down at our table over and over and over again to tell his story. And at the end of the night, he said, like you're going to come back and see me again, aren't you? And I said, well, we live on the other side of the city. But he said, but you're going to come back and see me, John, right? Because he was pretty sure we'd started a relationship. It began by seeing. Matthew would tell you that was what happened to him. Jesus saw him and, Matthew said, and stopped. As he went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew. To stop is why this is a worldwide image. People know that worldwide, that when you see this, it means you've got more to take in. Slow down. Take in what's around you. And I think like a child holding an adult face in their hands, wanting that adult to take in the fact that right in front of them is somebody that they feel like they're missing. I don't want you to miss me. God would like to take our face and just cause us to see and then to totally stop. Jesus was modeling his ministry methods for these guys at plenty of tables. It wasn't just, you like to eat, I like to eat. Did Jesus like to eat? One time he was accused of just spending all his time eating with drunkards and gluttons, is what they said. But what was he doing? Wisdom was proved right by its actions. He was sitting stopped with people because that's where eye to eye, heart to heart, we share our stories, we hear their stories, and we begin to transfer. That's when transformation happens, through the exchanges that happen when we begin to stop and when we begin to spend time. This is your most important commodity, isn't it? It's what you always wish you had more of. We all get the same amount, and Jesus was living the Word in flesh with the constraint of time. Do you know that one time Jesus was thirsty? And it was at a beverage stop where he sat with a woman. He needed water. He was out, and he asked her for water. And literally over, of course, there wasn't bottled water. It was non-bottled spring water. And over that conversation that just involved slowing down to spend time with her, starting with a conversation about the beverage that he needed, the water that he began to present to her living water. But it happened when he was spending time with her. Her life transformed. She goes off to a village, tells them what happened to her, and the next thing you know, domino ripple through one life, just over non-bottled spring water. No wonder Jesus, when he paused with his disciples, held a cup in his hand. And he said, listen, and he poured wine in it and said, listen, whenever you drink of this cup, why don't you remember me? That wasn't only remember what I'm going to do on the cross, but remember the way I would simply slow down with people. He was the bread of life. He was the wine of life, but he would slow down with them and use two common table elements to just simply remind them of the powerful things that would happen, even teaching that he was giving them at a table. It's a place that we tend to slow down. How many you like to eat? I mean, I ask people, and most people do. You got great ministry potential, because it's a wonderful place at the table to not only be with Jesus or be with your family, but to be Jesus up close with others, whether it's over a beverage, simple as water, whether it's over a loaf of bread and just a stick of butter. I mean, good night. Here's the international food. You and I can impact lives in simple ways, in simple places where we get to slow down and spend time. Most people, if you could really get them to define love, they would tell you that it's spelled Time. That the people who've loved them have spent time with them. They've been up close for longer than a split second to say, hi, how are you? I'm fine. But actually enough time to share heart to heart, life on life. And that's what Jesus was teaching them in his ministry methods. That it was really see, stop, spend time with. And their lives had been impacted that way. They tell their own personal stories in Scripture, and then they allow you to see the stories of others. And eventually, you and I are supposed to learn that that's what a laborer is. What's a laborer? Somebody who strategically targets, aims carefully their life to follow, fix their eye on Jesus, follow his method of just simply knowing that up close in the mainstreams, one life at a time, when you see, when you stop, when you spend time with, that's when high impact. How we started this, high impact happens. How's my life going to have an impact? How's your life going to have an impact? We follow Jesus' plan A. And we recognize for you, for me, and the people that we're among, take a moment, just a moment. Look down at your feet. I'm going to look at mine. We tend to look past feet, but man, feet are an interesting thing, because they are what make us mobile. Your feet move all the time. And Jesus didn't want a static kingdom that was made up of buildings that you'd have to get people inside. His plan was that we would become mobile churches. That your feet, that you house Jesus, and now his plan is a body that is you and me and every other person who will choose to do the two things Jesus said mattered most. What is a labor? To love God with everything in you and love people around you profoundly the way Jesus modeled. Would that impact? Oh, Christian history proves that it sets a domino ripple effect beyond anything your wildest imagination could take in. That's a lifestyle of kingdom laborership 24/7. That's what you want to choose. If you want a high impact life, you want to aim on the target of your life for what Jesus said. I mean, he's reliable. He's a good source. What Jesus said mattered most. And as a kingdom laborer, focus upward on loving God with everything in you. And then with everything in you, loving that person that's near you in any given moment. Jesus said those are the two things that matter most. And I could sum up everything in those two things, Jesus said. It was one day when I'd just returned from a trip and I'd gone to recline in our easy chair when I noticed there was a spot on the ceiling. I called my wife in the room and said, "What's that?" And she said, "I don't know. There was a bad storm before you came home today last night, and we must have a leak in the roof." Looked like substantial enough, I better get it taken care of. I checked my weather app, and sure enough, there's another storm coming in. So I started making telephone calls. And I remember so specifically when the guy who answered said, "Hello, this is James the roofer. How can I help you?" I said, "Well, hello, James the roofer. Actually, if you're fair, if you're affordable, if you can come today, you could help me. It looks like a leak in my roof. I've got a water spot that demonstrates it." And he said, "What part of the city do you live in?" I told him I was on the east side, and he said I could be there by 4 o'clock. Hey, you're on time. I couldn't believe that this guy was going to show up at 2 minutes early and ready to work. He showed up at my door a little different than I'd envisioned when I talked to them on the phone. Have you ever had an image of what you think somebody looks like? No roofing uniform, no James the roofer on his shirt. But he was, he was cordial, kind, and he walked in. I showed him on my ceiling where the water spot was. He said he'd crawl up there and he'd let me know. Gave me a quote. Very fair. And I said, "Well, I'm just going to sit down and relax and let you go to it." When he showed up 45 minutes later to show me what he had done, he said, "Listen, it's completely fixed. You'll have to paint that spot, but you need to know it only took me half the time, half the materials. I've adjusted your bill." "I'm sorry, you've done what?" You know, when they adjust a bill, it usually goes up, not down. And I said, "Well, let me see." And I said, "James, that's half what you told me it was going to cost me." He said, "Well, sir, it only took me half the time, half the materials. That seems like the fair price." I went to get a method of payment. When I came back, I heard him taking a call. And as he hung up, I said, "James, don't ever let an answering service take your incoming calls. It was when you said, 'Hello, this is James the roofer. How can I help you?' that I kind of in my heart just felt really good about you. And sure enough, I've had a good experience." And at that point, I patted him on the shoulder and said, "You're doing such a great job, James." And he stepped back for a moment and said, "Sir, I can't accept your compliment." I thought that was strange. I mean, don't you think that's kind of strange? Who doesn't accept a compliment? When I thought, well, maybe I need to rephrase it. So, "James, listen, I really needed the help that you've provided, and I'm so grateful for the way that you've come alongside me and my family today. And listen, thank you for the adjusted bill downward and your pledge to come back if it ever gives me trouble." And patted him on the shoulder again. "I'm just so glad I found you today." He said, "Sir, honest, I can't accept your compliment unless you have just a minute, sir." And I said, "Well, sure, I've got a minute." I didn't know he was setting me up. He said, "Sir, I'd like to explain. 13 years ago, you wouldn't have wanted me near your house, your wife, your children, yourself. I was strung out on drugs and my life was a mess. Then I don't know, sir, we've never met before, whether you'll understand what I'm about to explain, but 13 years ago, someone explained to me that the God who created the whole universe, who loves each one of us, sir, sent his son for us to have a relationship with him. And as that started happening in my life began to be changed forever. And sir, while I appreciate your compliment, I couldn't accept it until I could tell you that I am who I am because of him." I said, "James, brother." He said, "What? You're one?" And I said, "Don't act so surprised. Yeah, I'm one. We just haven't met before." He said, "If you're already a Christian, then why did God send me to your house today?" I mean, I tell him every day I want to go wherever he needs somebody like me to be his 24/7 laborer. He sends me all kinds of places. And so I don't know. We needed our roof fixed. He said, "But I don't understand. I want to be where he needs laborers. He doesn't have enough of us yet." He said, you know, I had one time when I was downtown and there was a gunshot in the house and people started screaming for 911. I scrambled off the roof. I was all of a sudden in the house kneeling beside this person who was dying, sharing the love God had for them and the possibility of them, like the thief on the cross next to Jesus today, they could be with him in paradise. And he said, nobody can tell me that a roofer on the job that day didn't make all the difference for eternity for that person. I said, could my family and I, because at this point they were all in the room with me, could we pray for you? And he took his bandana off his head and bowed his head, wasn't quite sure what to do. And my little family of 4 gathered around him and we put our hands on James the roofer and prayed for him as God's everyday kingdom laborer 24/7. As we did, my son pulled on my sleeve like, Dad, you do notice he's sobbing uncontrollably. He'd formed a pool of tears on my hardwood floor. And as he pulled his bandana out of his back pocket and apologized to me away from my family, sir, I'm sorry I lost it like that. But sir, I've been doing this for 13 years and no one has ever validated my ministry before today. Shame on us. When did we get the idea that ministry is something more complicated than what James had just done with me that day? If you choose to be a laborer, it's 24/7. Everywhere you work, everywhere you recreate and play, everywhere you go, you're on the job. And Christ is with you. He said, if you'll do this day after day, I'll be with you. As others learn from you how this can be multiplied and become a movement, which Jesus started kind of a domino ripple, passing into others his ministry model, his ministry methods, and eventually the world began to be touched. But Jesus is the one that said the harvest is plentiful. And he's still looking for more mobile churches, more feet like yours. Your feet go where no one else's feet go. And he doesn't have a plan B for those people you're among. You're his plan A. You're his laborer. You're incredibly valuable to Jesus' plan A. It involves you choosing to be the kingdom laborer every day who is willing, one life at a time, in the mainstreams, up close, to see, to stop, to spend time with, loving God, loving others, and bringing the Jesus who's alive in you up close to them. That's what being a laborer, a kingdom laborer, is all about. Now it's your chance to choose. You know that coming out of decades where people have gotten the impression, maybe you have, that it takes special abilities to be able to advance and build the kingdom of God. You have to have upfront skills, or you've got to have a big education under your belt, or you got to have this talent or that. It is not what Jesus was looking for. Think about those he chose. Those early beginning building blocks out of which he was going to build the kingdom, they were ordinary. So ordinary, they had a hard time getting over themselves, much like Old Testament characters who would say, I stutter, I stammer, I'm from the least clan, the least tribe, I'm the youngest. They'd come up with all these excuses that God didn't want to hear because he didn't want to see what they could do. He wanted them to experience what God can do when ordinary people just begin to let God do his extraordinary stuff through them. So I want to talk to you about the fact that you could, without realizing it, you could think that the road is closed to people like you. You've got reasons that you'll come up with, or the enemy of your soul and your legacy that is intended to have an impact will come around. He's called the accuser of the brethren. He'll camp out on your shoulder and he'll talk to you and tell you you're so imperfect. And you'd agree with him. And I would agree with you. You know why I would? Because I've had to get over myself. Let's talk about getting over ourselves. That's pretty important for us because we get this idea that God's got to have perfect people. No, he doesn't. I've traveled the world. I haven't met any yet. There are none. He doesn't have a plan B. We're it. Imperfect people who, if we're willing, just look at that index finger, if we're willing to point at the one who is perfect. That's what the guy who was preparing the way for the Lord, John the Baptist, before Jesus got here, when Jesus starts coming onto the scene, John didn't point at himself like, I'm the cool dude. No, this isn't about us, it's about him. So John the Baptist just pointed, look, there's the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. Imperfect people can be pointers to the one who is perfect. It's not only not being perfect, but it's the struggle that you've had with sin. And you think that disqualifies you. Let me just offer you a $20 bill. If I were to give you this, wait just a minute though. Before I would think of giving this to you, I would. What if I were to crumple this thing up? Would that make your interest any different? What if I were to put it on the floor and I'd begin to grind the dirt off my shoes onto this $20 bill, and now it's soiled and dirty? Are you less interested now in this 20? And some of you would almost like to reach out and take it. And why is that? Because it hasn't lost its value. And neither have you. You may have gotten bruised and messed up, sin-soiled along the way. But Jesus would go, no, I want you. You haven't lost your value to me. Maybe you say, but I feel so unworthy. I mean, when we talk about this, there's just this feeling of unworthiness. Well, welcome to the unworthy club. We don't do anything that we do because we're worthy. We do it because He's worthy. This isn't about me. You know, the great opportunity for me is to move from egocentricity to Christ centrality. It's about Him. I can be a pointer to Jesus. And if He wants me, then yeah, thank you so much. I love the psalmist's words in Psalm 130 when he said, if you, Lord, kept a record of sins, who of us could stand? Not one of us. But with you, O Lord, he said, forgiveness abounds so that you can use us in your plan. That is God's plan. Using people like you and me who feel imperfect, unworthy, sin-soiled, but maybe you'd say, but I feel like shouldn't I have more training than just simply, see, stop, spend time with? Well, let's take a moment and let me tell you that some of the best training that we see validated for multiplying movements to happen were people who Jesus showed up for them, and they just shared with somebody else how Jesus showed up in their life. And that began a domino ripple effect. Has He ever shown up for you? Come on, hand in the air. Let Him know that you're proud of the fact that He has shown up for you in your life. Has He shown up for you more than once? I mean, both my hands are, He's shown up for me more than I have hands or fingers to count. Has He shown up for you? Can I tell you what that is? That's your God stories. Those are the things that validate that not He once showed up for people. These stories that are yours and mine that He's shown up for us, these say He still shows up. And for people that we see and stop and get up close to in the mainstreams of life, they need to know if He showed up for you and He showed up for me, He'll show up for them. And that's what your stories, your God stories, your how He's lit your heart on fire and set your life on purpose. As you share what you're familiar with, your own story, they can't unqualify your story. It's your story to tell. But it's your God story, and it points to the one who is like James the roofer. I am who I am because of Him. Maybe you're still saying, but I get so nervous. I get tongue-tied and I get paralyzed in fear. Well, can I help you with something that's helped me through the years? It's just a simple 10-finger prayer. And it goes like this. Maybe you want to put your 10 fingers up and do it with me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Let's do it one more time. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now pause for a minute and take a look at the two smallest parts of the equation are I and me. It doesn't matter what you don't know how to do, what I don't know how to do. It's all the stuff that he can do when we just choose to be a laborer and we allow him to employ us in his plan. And his help wanted sign, a laborer, that's an anybody, it's an everybody word. There's no exclusivity in his employment plan. Everybody counts. He's an equal opportunity employer. You, me, anyone you begin to just get up close and pray that 10-finger prayer. By the way, let's stop when I say stop. I can do all things through Christ. Do you notice that your index finger, your pointer finger is, through Christ who strengthens me? Because he is just looking for people who are willing to step in and let him begin to do all these things that he'll do if you and I will just follow his methods and his model, one life at a time. I would encourage you today to begin to do these simple things in your life, letting Jesus with you arm you with all the strength you need, and begin just practicing this week what it means to be up close with people, not up front, up close with the people that you're in the mainstreams with. And recognizing the high value of the one you're seeing. Maybe you've never met them before, but they're not a stranger to God. They're well known to him. He's been waiting for a laborer like you whose feet would get near them. And when you not only see them, but you stop and you begin to learn their name, he's known their name, but no one maybe before you has ever mentioned their name in prayer before God the Father, but now you're learning their name and he sees you spending time. Can you imagine the joy in his Father's heart that this one who is his creation is no longer invisible? He now has a laborer in that field who is seeing them, who's stopping with them, who's spending time with them because you chose to get over yourself and get into his plan A of high impact living as an everyday, along the way, kingdom laborer.